Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar. Tonight we are talking about solar for your congregation, and this is session 1. So we're going to talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of solar, we called it, and then there's new federal funding opportunities that we want to kind of go over with everyone. And then we have a session 2 next week of our webinar, and that is 3 stories of congregations. So next week we'll actually hear from folks who have gone solar on their rooftops, or they may have some ground mounted systems, and we'll really hear the process from them about what it looked like in their congregation to go solar, and what obstacles they faced, how they overcame them. They'll be very honest about how they financed their projects. So that should be a really great night for us as well. My name is Joanna Salinas. I am the outreach coordinator with the Waukesha County Green Team. And with me tonight from the Green Team is Deb Schneider. She is actually the president of the Waukesha County Green Team and will be helping to facilitate the chat and the Zoom tonight. And also with me is Eric Grimes. Eric, I did not ask you how to pronounce your last name. I just assumed it was Grimes. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. He says it's right. Eric is a project manager at Full Spectrum Solar, and we'll be talking all about the technical part of the solar. And so I just wanted to introduce the Waukesha County Green Team real quick. For those of you unfamiliar, we are a 501c3 nonprofit located here in Waukesha County. If you are joining us from outside of Wisconsin, Waukesha is a county that's just to the west of Milwaukee County in southeastern Wisconsin. And our goal of the Waukesha County Green Team is to promote sustainability throughout the county. So we do that by working with municipalities, organizations, schools, residents, and we really talk about renewable energy and zero waste. We have a permaculture and gardening group. We really talk about all things sustainability-wise, and we facilitate projects such as the Waukesha County Creation Care Network to uplift and assist people in their sustainability journey. So I will share with you at the end of this a website for the Waukesha County Creation Care Network, but we have a ton of resources on there that are really designed to uplift and support your creation care work within your congregations. Included in there is like a guide for your building and operations folks. There's logos and resources for your creation care teams. There's all sorts of stuff in there that it's just free to use. So we'd love for you to use it and dig into it and let us know how we can improve it and add to it. Yeah. So tonight's webinar, we're going to cover the reasons why congregations want to go solar and why now is a great time to do it, including those new incentives. We're going to talk about basic overview of how solar works. We're assuming a lot of people are just information gathering at this point, so we don't want to skip that important piece, as well as talk about what does your building need to support solar, because we know some of our churches could be 100, 150 years old. Some of these houses of worship could be, and they're going to have different needs than a brand new construction. So we want to cover those types of items for you. And then we're going to dig into the incentives and the new federal funding that's available, and kind of go over some ways that congregations have financed their projects. And we'll have time for some questions and answers at the end. All right, and then I introduced myself, I introduced Eric, so I think we will move on from here. So, all right, so what are some reasons why your congregation wants to go solar? If any of you kind of have some ideas you want to drop in the chat, feel free, but I will tell you what we have found. Lots of congregations want to go solar to save money. We know that solar is a way to give your house of worship some long-term financial stability. So when you purchase a solar array, you're purchasing all of the energy that that solar system can make right up front. So you're locking in your energy costs for the next 25, 30, 35 years. We know that energy costs are rising. Uh, there are areas in the country that are experiencing some really extreme weather events that are affecting the energy grid. And there are areas of the country where energy costs have gone up for folks by, 50 to 100%. So we really believe that when you're purchasing solar, you're giving yourself some really good financial stability into the future. And then I also want to point out that the average return on investment in the United States for a solar project is about 10 years on average. So results will vary. When you get a solar quote from a solar installer, that's one of the things they will highlight is what that average return on investment is for your project. Another reason why congregations like to go solar is it shows a real strong commitment to creation care. You know, as people of faith, we understand that creation is a gift from our Creator. And so we're excited to live out our faith by better stewarding the natural world through renewable energy. You know, solar lowers your congregation's carbon footprint. Um, and since all that energy that your panels produce is clean, carbon-free energy. And then something that we don't often think about is that solar panels attract younger generations of folks. It is an outward sign that your congregation cares for the environment. It shows that your faith community is forward thinking, that you believe that you're going to be there in 30 years, which a lot of faith communities are struggling with right now. And it shows that you practice what you preach. All right. And actually, next week, when we hear directly from the congregations, there are congregations that are going to address this. What has happened in the life of their congregation since they put solar, and some of the results are really surprising. All right, but there are reasons why your congregation should go solar now that I just want to cover real quick. So prices. We know that up to a few years ago, solar was at a historic low in terms of cost per kilowatt. Inflation kind of drove up prices a little bit, but Eric can attest to this, that the cost for materials is dropping once again. So now is a great time to take advantage of the low costs for materials. And also when we're talking about the scale of solar that would go on a rooftop for a faith community, there's an economy of scale that's going to help keep your prices lower. And the other reason to go solar is the new incentives that are out there for faith communities. So never before have nonprofits and houses of worship been eligible for that 30% tax credit that homeowners could get. But the Inflation Reduction Act that passed last year offers, I think the number is $369 billion in tax credits. And for the first time, nonprofits can take advantage of that 30% tax credit. And there are actually adders on there that if you meet certain criteria, it can be up to 60% of the cost of your solar you can get back. So after Eric kind of goes over how does solar work, we're going to dig into the very specifics of what that federal tax credit looks like. It's actually called a federal direct pay because we know that houses of worship don't have to pay taxes. So it's not a tax credit. It's a direct pay option that you file a form and the government directly pays you back. So And with that, Eric, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Joanna. So I work for Full Spectrum Solar as a project manager. At Full Spectrum, we are a turnkey residential and commercial installation company. Essentially, that means we handle every aspect of the solar installation. We do the sales process, we do the assessment, we do the permitting, we do the construction, everything. And we even help you kind of monitor your system. A really nice thing about this company, I've only worked here for about 6 months, but I've learned in that short time that we are focused on kind of delivering information to you. We like to make sure that you are comfortable and confident with your investment. So it's a really good company that has lifted my spirits, so to speak, as far as the solar industry as a whole. I know there's a lot of bad actors out there. Knowing that Full Spectrum is one of the many that seem to have your interests at heart is a really good thing. We were founded out of Madison in 2002 by a couple of brothers. We've been going strong ever since. We've got many installations in southern Wisconsin. And the Madison office, we have a Madison and a Waukesha office. The Madison office is owned by Full Spectrum. They have many sustainable features to the building. They have their own solar installation on the roof. All of the vehicles that we use have fuel efficiency standards that we try to meet. We have electric vehicles that we use. Just across the board, we try to have a good sustainable practice to our business. So that's Full Spectrum in a nutshell there. And then getting into kind of the nitty gritty here, a little bit of terminology. I will apologize to anyone who already knows this, but I'm going to go over it for everyone just in case. So let's start with some terminology. Kilowatt hour versus kilowatt. So kilowatts measure the power capacity. In other words, a kilowatt is a measure of the energy your system can produce. For example, if you get a quote from a solar installer, it will be measured in kilowatts, whereas a kilowatt hour is the power used over time. So your electric bill will be measured in kilowatt hours. And then, yeah, every site is going to have a different amount of energy that they're going to use. So pay attention to your electric bill. And hopefully your installer will also want to have access to your electric bill to give you good information. And so how does a solar system work? The basics of it are photons from the sun hit the solar array on your roof or your ground mount. Those solar panels collect the energy, and I like to say the sun pushes the photons into the panels, creating direct current. That direct current is traveling through the panels down into an inverter. That inverter will change your DC energy over to AC energy, which is what every house uses. And then that will go out to the electric meter and then off to the utility. So if you are creating solar on your rooftop, then you will, if you're overproducing, we'll get into that in a little detail here in a second, but if you're overproducing and you're feeding that off to the grid, you're not sending that back to the utility, you're sending that off to your neighbors for them to take advantage of. So let's talk about the inverter. The inverter is the heart of the array. It's a crucial part of the solar system. They convert the DC energy that your solar panels produce into appliance-friendly AC electricity. They can be mounted on the inside of your home or the outside. This graphic illustrates the most basic and cheapest design for a grid-tied solar system. This is called a string inverter. It's essentially panels connected to their neighbors, feeding down onto the inverter itself. This is a good way for a building that has prime solar irradiance, no shading. This is going to be your most effective means to create electricity. The downside to these systems is that if shading hits one of those panels, then the rest of the system is going to be performing at that shaded panel's efficiency. And then onto inverters, you can add things like power optimizers, which will break out that shaded panel problem. So each panel will be producing individually. And then there are microinverters as well. Microinverters are basically power inverters at the panel level. Those function well on rooftops with more shade, for example. And with those systems, there are grid-tied and off-grid systems. Grid-tied is the most common one that you will see for most installers. A grid-tied design is the one, like I had said, that will deliver electricity from the rooftop out through the meter and off onto the grid to your neighbors, to everyone who can take advantage of it if you don't. And then the off-grid is where you will see batteries, you'll need charge controllers, you'll need a whole series of other components to facilitate an off-grid system. Off-grid systems are also a more expensive option, and a lot of installers will not pursue kind of off-grid options. And then net metering means that excess electricity produced by your solar system is exported to the utility grid and subtracted from the amount of electricity you import from the grid, reducing your overall electricity costs. This graph shows how you would use and produce your energy over the course of a day. If you're producing more than you're using, you'll get a credit on your electric bill. Generally, you want the total area of the yellow curve when your solar array is producing energy to be equal to the total area of the blue curve. The solar is the yellow, the blue is your consumption. The area of the yellow curve will also vary from day to day because sunny weather is much better for solar than overcast or rainy days. You can use this as kind of a, if your system has monitoring, excuse me, you can use this to kind of track how the weather is performing. This chart shows the annual use versus projected solar use for 1 year for an average building. Some months, your solar array will generate more energy than you use, and other months, you will be using the grid plus your solar for energy consumption. Yellow is the anticipated solar for your area, while blue is typical energy use for 1 year. The utility will reconcile your electricity production and consumption with each bill. For most of the year, when you are using more electricity than the solar produces in a month, net metering helps you get full retail rate for electricity you produce. With We Energies, that's around 14 cents per kilowatt hour. If you produce more electricity than you use, like April through June, in this graph, the excess electricity gets credited at 4.2 cents per kilowatt hour and will be applied to your standard monthly fee. This policy is set by We Energies. Every utility has their own net metering rules. In general, when identifying whether solar is right for you, you need to start by considering the site itself. For any solar site, you want to have good sun exposure between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. This means the site is mostly free from shading, from trees, from neighboring buildings, from poles, power lines, etc. Google's Project Sunroof has a good kind of way to get a rough estimate of how well suited your particular rooftop is for a solar project. It doesn't do good things kind of estimating garages or smaller structures, and definitely not for ground-mounted systems. So there are two main types of solar array mounts. First being, most common being the array that you see on homes and businesses up on the roof. Roof-mounted solar is easy for installers to do. It is relatively cost-effective. And regardless of how the array is mounted, a good solar window, meaning the amount of sunlight available to the modules over the course of a year is required. The main structural considerations to think about when putting a PV array on the roof, first of all, as with solar arrays, avoid shading from trees. If you have trees close to your structure, then that is going to impact your performance. Anything kind of blocking it, if you have a neighboring building as well, will impact that performance. A good solar installer will also take shade readings for their proposed surface. So make sure to have that conversation with your solar installer about the shade impact. If you have other structures that you can put it on, like a garage or an outbuilding that isn't connected directly to your main electrical system, then you're going to look at higher costs for your installation because you will be working on trenching or other means to deliver the electricity. A frequently asked question we get is, do panels need to be cleaned or do they break in a hailstorm? The answer to both is no. There's a caveat to that. With snow, generally, you want to kind of leave it alone. You can expose a little bit of your solar system if you can gain access to it and let the sun do the rest for you. Solar frames nowadays are generally all black, like you can see in the photo here. So letting the sun just do its thing will easily melt that snow, and that snow will just slide right off. Now, with hailstorms in particular, solar panels are rated, if I'm not mistaken, 1-inch hail at 50 miles per hour, I think is the rating. I have seen some solar systems when I was servicing a solar system. I saw an instance where the shingles of the roof were tore off by the wind and basically slapped over on top of the panels like a blanket. And this was covering 7 panels, and about 2 of those were broken, whereas the roof itself entirely needed to be replaced. So the solar panels can take quite a beating. Another consideration here is squirrel damage. If you have trees next to your roof, then consider getting some sort of protection against critters. Critter Guard will save you a lot of money on your investment, especially because those types of damages are not covered by manufacturer warranties. Ground mounts. Ground mounts are a great solution for your solar system if you have adequate space to put it in your yard. It requires a large unshaded area to be able to take advantage of that solar irradiance. Larger arrays are perfect for this as well. Because they aren't on the roof, they can be positioned anywhere and take advantage of the best solar window. Generally, they require large unshaded areas, like I said. The array is anchored either to concrete footings, steel I-beams, or many different methods to secure them to the ground. There are even simple ballasted methods that you can use to put your solar on the ground. So, considerations for your system. When an installer performs a site assessment, they take these things into consideration to determine system cost, size, and design, and so should you. When doing a site assessment, Full Spectrum Solar will first ask your monthly electric use and combine that with the pitch and orientation of your building, the shading that we measure, and then we use all of that to kind of generate the graphs that you saw earlier, your building's consumption versus the potential solar production. These considerations, there are other considerations that are considered adders. They don't mean things like fancy extras. They are often necessary, like Critter Guard, to get your panels safely and properly installed on your property. Panels should go where you get the most light, like the solar window. The background image here shows more of the Google project sunroof. Look for the yellow spots instead of the purple spots. That's the key takeaway of that one. And I think, yeah, this is going to go back to Joanna.
All right. Thank you so much, Eric. And then I just wanted to mention, as I was listening to Eric, I just wanted to mention a couple other things. One of the things you want to consider as you are looking at your particular building and putting solar on is you want to consider what's beneath your solar system. When we're talking about snow, there are definitely times after a large snowstorm when it melts and that snow is going to come off in big chunks from your building. So if your panels are right above your main walkway into, your house of worship, into your church, into, wherever that is, you could be looking at kind of a safety issue there. So that's something that you definitely want to discuss when, you're designing your system and think about. Another thing I just wanted to mention that I know several houses of worship have done is they've started small. When you're talking about, especially a large building, chances are you're not going to start by having a system that's going to cover all of your electrical needs. So you want to consider that it's okay to start with, let's, maybe we're going to do part of it this year and we can add on to it 5, 10, 15 years down the road. Another thing to think about is the age of your roof. Did you go over that, Eric? I apologize if I missed it.
No, age is definitely a good thing to pay attention to, because if you have the potential to replace your roof in the next 8 to 10 years, then it is absolutely worth taking care of that before you put solar up.
Mhm.
I don't know of any solar installer who will remove and replace a solar system for free. So yeah, just save yourself a lot of time and money by getting the roof replaced first.
Mhm. Yeah. So if there is damage to your roof from hail, from a weather event, from something that would be covered automatically from your building's property insurance, they will also cover the cost to take the panels down to replace the roof. They will potentially cover the cost to the panels, depending upon the warranty to them. They will cover all of that as part of your property insurance. But if you just need to make a general repair to your roof, that cost is not covered. So that is definitely something to think about as well. And then we can go over specific questions at the end if you have specific questions about your building in terms of what the solar might look like on it. But what I want to go over right now are the new incentives for houses of worship. So we have 30% off your solar panel installation now, which is really, really exciting. As I mentioned before, this was never available before to nonprofits or houses of worship, but the Inflation Reduction Act has now come into full effect in 2023, and it does include this direct pay provision for tax exempt organizations, which means it's now available for nonprofits, churches, synagogues, mosques, and other tax exempt organizations. For sure, 30% is guaranteed by that, and it could be up to 60% of the cost of your project. Before the direct pay provision, there was a workaround that tax exempt organizations could get the federal tax credit. And I have a slide that kind of goes over it because some of our congregations that we're going to hear from next week actually did this. So a workaround in the past was before direct pay, you could have a private company who would be willing to purchase the solar for you and put it on your building, and they would claim that federal tax credit then. So one of our congregations we're going to hear from next week, they had a congregation member willing to create an LLC. That LLC is a tax-paying entity. The LLC congregation member then was the one purchasing the solar. And now that congregation is making payments to the congregation member over the lifetime of that solar to purchase it back. So that was the workaround that the nonprofit could get solar at that lower rate. However, there's no need to do that now because now nonprofits can take advantage of that directly. Okay, so next up here. All right, so when I talk about up to 60%, how that's going to work is that there's these 10% adders. Your solar panels have, and I'm not sure the exact amount, I heard 40% or 50%. If 40 or 50% of the panels are manufactured here in the United States, then potentially you could get an additional 10% tax credit. As of right now, today, that's very difficult to do. Eric and I were chatting. I think we said there's one manufacturer in the US that your panels would qualify for it. If you're looking at a project 5, 10, 15 years down the road, that it's probably much more likely that that 10% adder would be achievable. Right now, that's a little difficult. These next two actually are really important provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act because both of them are specifically targeting areas that have been underserved by solar in the past. So the goal here with these two adders is to rectify some of that historical disinvestment that we've seen in low-income communities and in places that previously had a significant amount of fossil fuel extraction or production, such as communities that were next to a coal-fired power plant or were in mining communities. So this is the federal government's way of helping to uplift those communities and give some additional financial incentives. So for these, there is a map. I will send this out, the link to this after this when I send out the recording, and I just took a screenshot of it. So the federal government has a map that you can go into and you look up your zip code and it will tell you whether you're in one of these zip codes. And I meant to grab another zoomed in screenshot of Wisconsin. So and I might have this wrong, but one of the orange ones are energy communities. Energy communities are census tracts that have had some type of a coal mine or plant that has been retired since in the last few decades. And they're actually, it looks like there's very little in southeastern Wisconsin if you're located in southeastern Wisconsin, but there is an area in Madison. There's also an area in the Wauwatosa Elm Grove area that qualifies for that 10% adder. Definitely, this is a map that you want to visit. There's also the provision in here with unemployment, and also this low income community adder. I think that is also represented on this map. So definitely go in there, play around with it, see if you are in an area that would qualify for one of those adders. All right, and actually I'm gonna pop back here a second. Okay, so the process for getting this direct pay is very similar to the process for getting a tax credit. So the way this works is, let's say you've gone forward with your project, you get installed, and there's something that's called permission to operate, and that's granted by your utility. So this usually happens like your system is installed, an inspector comes out, you get inspected, they swap out your meters from the utility, and then the utility has to grant you permission to operate. On the day that you that you have that permission to operate, that is considered your PTO date. So if that happens in, say, 2023, then in a normal tax cycle, like when people would go and file their 2023 taxes, you would be eligible to file for direct payment. There is a form And I'm going to tell you, I don't know exactly what that is. And I know we're all houses of worship. So when I say consult your tax professional, that may not be really accurate, but consult a financial advisor for how exactly that'll happen. I believe it's still through the IRS website, but I could be wrong about that. But you're going to file paperwork, and then you will get a direct payment for that 30% or potentially higher if you qualify for the other credits. That will come back to you sometime in that first half of the year. What that means, though, is that you have to pay the full 100% of your project upfront. So just like a homeowner who's paying for their entire project and then they get that rebate back on their taxes, you will still have to pay for your whole project upfront and then expect that 30% check back from the federal government. And then additionally, in addition to that 30%, in Wisconsin, we have Focus on Energy, and Focus on Energy has rebates for putting solar on your building. And Eric, I'm going to see if you know this. So I know on the homeowner side, it's a pretty small rebate, like $500 or so rebate for homeowners right now. But I'm assuming nonprofits have the same rate as businesses. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, that is dependent on system size.
Yeah, and those are significantly higher. So one of our congregations that we're going to hear from next week, I believe they told me they got a $12,000 rebate from Focus on Energy. And those commercial size Focus on Energy rebates have been up to $50,000 depending upon the size of your system. So those are significant rebates that when you get a solar quote, they will tell you what you qualify for from Focus on Energy, which is fantastic and just helps that whole return on investment for you. And then I just wanted to touch on some ways that I know that congregations have financed their systems in our area. So one, I think we're all familiar with just the typical fundraising, right? There's a great story one of our congregations is going to have next week about how they educated their congregation members and then got an incredible amount of donations directly from congregation members. So that certainly is a way, to start the financing of this. And then if you have a chunk left that you need more traditional financing options, in Wisconsin, we have PACE financing. And PACE financing stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. And it's a financing structure that's available. It uses local government assessment tools to provide security for private financing of privately owned projects. And that sounds like a lot of jargon, but it's very specific financing that's used for energy and water savings projects and distributed generation projects like solar. So what it does is it gives banks and private financing firms security to give you a loan that will last for the entire length of what's expected for your ROI. So for example, if you went to the bank and they said, okay, I have to replace my furnace in my building. They might say, okay, an equipment financing is only 5 years. But if you can prove a certain amount of energy savings, they will allow you then to take that loan period and maybe bump it out to 15 or 20 years, and you're paying the loan back with the savings that you're getting from your new energy efficient furnace. So I hope that makes sense. So this is a map. It has to be adopted by your local municipality, and I believe it's by county. Anything in green in Wisconsin, the local county has adopted PACE financing. And so you should be able to go into a lender and ask for some PACE financing options. And then additionally, there are a lot of banks, it's becoming more and more common, that have very specific energy efficiency and renewable energy loan terms that are designed just like PACE. It extends the life of the loan, that's significantly lower interest rates, and it's really designed for your energy efficiency project. So, all right. And again, I may not have explained that super great. And if you need a better explanation, feel free to drop it in the chat. All right, and then certainly there's traditional financing options available as well, right? So if you already have a mortgage on your building, going to your mortgage lender and talking about the financing of that. Solar installers often have recommended financing companies that they will recommend as well, that they've worked with, that have these renewable energy financing options available. So that's definitely traditional financing works as well. But then in Wisconsin, I want to highlight, we do have additional grant programs. And if anyone knows of grant programs out there, feel free to drop them in the chat and share. So I've heard of like certain faith traditions may have granting opportunities for churches with in their synods or diocese, or however that works. You may have grant programs available to you, but Solar for Good is a program. It is facilitated by Renew Wisconsin. If you simply search online for Solar for Good, this website will come up for you. So this is just a screenshot of it. But they offer, through a foundation, they offer either grants for your solar project or they offer panels. And I just pulled a few screenshots that I'll go over really quickly. So when you apply, and I believe this is for any nonprofit, but houses of worship are definitely, a big focus for Solar for Good. You can be awarded up to 50% of the panels, the solar panels that you need for your project. So imagine that 50% of your panels are already appear on your roof, plus the 30% incentives, plus, the focus on energy. It really reduces the cost of your project dramatically. Now, I will tell you that I have heard from experience that getting the solar panels can complicate your project a little bit, because We Energies requires that the project has to have 100% of the same type of panels. So your solar installer has to be willing to get these solar panels from Solar to Good, and then has to be willing to source the rest of them and install them. I've heard that they are larger panels than the typical panel, and that some solar installers struggle a little bit to work with them. But that's definitely a conversation to have with your solar installer. If you really want to work with a particular solar installer and this is not an option for you, the great news is that Solar for Good also offers project grants. So if you could go the solar panel way or this project grant way, and they offer right down here, you can see like the size of your system. If you have a system that's up to 100 kilowatts, they will offer a grant of up to $150 per every kilowatt of solar energy, up to $10,000. If you have a system that's larger than that, it's up to $20,000. So that's a big chunk of money that they're definitely willing to grant. And then I didn't pull up the other one, but they also have for solar canopies. They have another type of grant situation for that. So Solar for Good is definitely something that you want to be aware of and apply for. I applied for it for my congregation, we ended up having to postpone our solar project because of our roof needs to be replaced. It's too close in that window. But the whole process when I did it was probably 4 years ago, was not difficult at all to apply, and my solar installer at that point helped me apply for it. So solar installers are definitely aware of the Solar for Good grant process. And then on the topic of solar installers, my suggestion to you is, just like any other building project where you would get multiple quotes, my suggestion is that you get multiple quotes from solar installers. We have worked with the MREA, which is the Midwest Renewable Energy Association, on some solar group buys. And through that process, we do a lot of vetting of solar installers. And we chose Full Spectrum Solar, Eric's company right there, last in 2022 as our solar installer for that solar group buy. And I have nothing but raves to say about them. They were a great solar company to work with. So definitely Full Spectrum Solar would be a great choice for a solar quote if you're ready to walk down that path. And if you want a list of some other solar companies that we also vetted and we would recommend, I'm happy to give that to you if you want to send me a private message. Also, you can reach out to the MREA. All right. And I think that we are moving into our question and answer. Do you guys have any questions? If you do, feel free to drop them in the chat. Deb, do we have any in the chat that you want to ask us?
Yeah, so Joanna, and just so if people are looking at the chat, there was a question that Eric did respond to about panel longevity. How long are panels good for and how long they are warranted for? Eric, do you want to just make that comment?
Yeah. Typically, panels are going to be, depending on the manufacturer, are going to be warranted for 20 to 25 years. And yeah, like I said in chat, the likelihood of them outlasting that warranty is pretty good. Anecdotally, I just looked up the longest still functioning solar panel, and it, if I remember correctly, it was commissioned in the 1970s, and it's still producing electricity today. It's not a typical solar panel like you would expect, but it's a small sphere, and it could power maybe a watch, very small, but it's still going. So yeah, the life of a solar panel is expected to be greater than that of the warranty.
So Eric, let me just tag on to that. So is there any degradation over time?
Yeah, there certainly is. You're going to see degradation of the panels, and over that warranty period, the manufacturer is going to have kind of a predicted degradation schedule of their panels.
Okay, so that's something else to ask about. So there was, in response to that IRS form, Joe put in the chat, and I don't know if he was Googling this, the IRS form might be 5695, just if people just hadn't seen that, but it is something to look into. So Joanna, when you were talking about We Energies and the Solar for Good, so there's a question in here from Dwayne. So are you saying that We Energies would not go along with the church installing part of the plan now and another set of panels in 10 years or so?
Ooh, so in talking about panel type, that's a really good question. Eric, I don't know if you know the answer to that. So say a congregation installs with a certain type of panel now, and then adds on to the system in 10 years, and it might be a different manufacturer of panels. Would that be an issue, or would that be considered a separate project?
If that is in regards to Solar for Good, I believe that is going to be just kind of in the immediate installation. We Energies really shouldn't have any sort of say over the type of panel that you install now versus later. That's going to be more so your preference.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's when you're installing a project, you can't mix different types of panels together. But if you're installing an entirely separate project years down the road, that's separate. Is that what?
Or if you're adding on to an existing project, because the panels that will be produced 10 years from now are probably not going to be the same specifications as they are today.
So it's almost as though you're adding on another segment to your project as opposed to combining the two panels with one inverter. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And when you get your system installed, chances are you're going to get your inverter sized to the solar system that you're going to have installed. So adding on to an existing inverter might not even be possible. You'll more than likely have another inverter installed to handle the newer solar installation.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was a question, in case people didn't see it in the chat, what does the MREA stand for? And that is the Midwest Renewable Energy Association. And Joanna, can we provide some contact information to the MREA when we provide our follow-up?
Yep, definitely. I will include a link to their website. They are really an excellent nonprofit within the Midwest working with renewable energy. So they are located in Custer, Wisconsin, but they host grow solar group buys and geothermal group buys now throughout the Midwest. They're a fantastic resource for renewable energy projects. There's one thing that I wanted to mention, and that is when you lose power, if you have a solar system on your roof, you're still going to lose power. So your solar panels are going to be, unless you have a battery backup system, if your neighborhood loses power, you are going to be cut off. Your solar system is, because as the line workers are coming and working to repair that in your community, your little power plant you have on your roof can't be shooting electricity out at them. So I just wanted to make sure people are aware of that, because often, my own husband including, whenever we lose power, he says, but we have solar. And I say, but we don't have a battery. So that does definitely affect it. So if you're looking for something where your building definitely needs power no matter what, you can pair solar with a generator and integrate the two systems. We did that a lot during our last solar group buy, or you can look at battery options. And I do want to mention that 30% federal tax credit includes money for battery systems. And also, if you need an electrical upgrade, like your electrical panel at the necessary to put solar on, it includes 30% towards that as well.
So Gianna, we have a question as far as the federal tax credit goes. Is it available on multiple installations? So one entity doing multiple installations, is it available multiple times, or is there just one?
No, it's available. It's available multiple times. Now, if you have installed earlier than 2023, it's not going to be available. Like you can't back credit it back. But anything from now forward, I had a chart for Eric. Do you know off the top of your head how long those tax credits were extended for?
I think 2032 is the date that was posted in chat. Yeah.
You can do as many things as you want between now and 2032 32, and there's no limit to those rebates, the direct pay. So you can do a project now, a project next year, a project the next year, and get that.
So Joanna, there's been a number of requests to provide information, follow-up information in terms of this recording, last night's recording,
Ooh,
as
sure.
well as our chat.
Yeah.
So when do you expect this particular recording to be available?
So assuming that the recording turns out and we don't need to re-record it, it should be available by tomorrow morning. So the recording from last night is already on our YouTube channel, the Waukesha County Green Team's YouTube channel, and I could probably find it and drop a link in the chat right now, but I'll send it out as well, the one from last night. The one from last night dealt very specifically with the homeowner benefits in the Inflation Reduction Act. So it's definitely great information. What I was trying to find today, and I'm going to look for an answer for still, is if any of those rebates are available on the nonprofit commercial side. So there's homeowner rebates for, let's say, for a heat pump for your building, for windows, for energy efficiency. I'm not sure what, if any of those cross over to the, larger building scale, nonprofit commercial. So I'll look for those, but definitely for yourself and even to share within your congregation, there is really, really great things coming down the line that just point of sale rebates, like stoves for electric stoves for $100, or getting a whole new a heat pump with $8,000 off. There's really some excellent things that will be available soon. So for those, the states have to facilitate all those point of sale rebates. So Wisconsin, we're looking at probably next summer before all of that becomes available. But the tax credit side of it is all available right now. So I will provide that information as well to you. And I saw in the chat that several of you are looking at having to get new HVAC systems. And so I'm going to dig into that and see what type of credits are available for you. For sure, there should be focus on energy ones. So I'll do some digging. And
so Joanna, in terms of the tax credit,
Mhm.
are those tax credits applied for? Do the houses of worship have to apply for them, or is that helped out with by your solar provider? How does that work?
The 30% ones that, yeah, so the 30% tax credits are their direct pay, and the solar installer will, I think, because there's so much information just coming out about it, the solar installer should be able to give you information about it as soon as all the information becomes really available. They definitely will be able to help you. There is information about how to actually apply for them. That will be available on the Department of Energy's website as well. So whoever just Googled the form, that information's out there. Thank you very much for doing it. I can't see the chats real well. So thank you for finding that. And, clearly that information is searchable right now. You do not need to file a tax return as a tax exempt organization. It is simply going to be a form. So I will say it is likely a tax form, but you don't need to go through the whole process of filing a tax return. It'll be a form you fill out. The solar installer will give you some type of proof that it's happened, or We Energies will, and you just will submit the form and the check should come back to you.
Yeah, and for Full Spectrum, how we go about pursuing that is focus on energy. We fill that out for you. In regards to any sort of federal tax credit, we provide guidance for that. The rest is going to be up to you to kind of handle that side of things. But yeah, we will definitely give you, and any good installer will give you all of the information necessary to take full advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a comment in the chat here that there's an individual who they've heard that from their national movement that the HVAC rebates would be available for the nonprofit sector, but there may not be a lot of information out there as of yet, or readily viewable or findable right now, if that's a word.
Yeah. I can tell you my piece of advice for all of you is to reach out to Focus on Energy and see what resources are available for you right now before you go solar. In my congregation, we reached out to Focus on Energy and they came out and did a whole building walkthrough for us for free. This was a couple of years ago. And they pointed out the areas that would give us the highest impact in energy efficiency and savings in our building, including insulation in one of our rooms. And then they talked us through then what type of rebates would be available from them to do that. And they are a tremendous resource. So I would suggest doing that first, because if you can improve the energy efficiency of your building, then the size solar system that you need to purchase is that much smaller, because you don't need to be paying for excess energy that you're not going to use.
That is the end of our questions, Joanna. Nice.
I really hope this has been helpful for all of you, and I hope you come back and hear some stories of congregations next week, because they're very inspirational. And truly, I meant it when I said, to check out the Waukesha County Creation Care Network, even if you're not in Waukesha County. We have a lot of congregations outside of Waukesha County, and we do kind of monthly programming. We're working on a Lenten series. It would be really fun just to connect and have people involved. So it's good to know we're not alone in our endeavors to move things forward. All right, have a good night.